ahead. The climate change, we are still in a pandemic. We are having this is a segregated town, segregated city of Gothenburg, with a distinct part of the city. And we have a very large-scale development in the central core of the city with new transportation needs. And of course, we have a lot of data within the city that we can use in better ways. So one way to deal with this is using parametric modeling and in urban planning and the creating of digital twins. And talking about creating a digital twin or this parametric model, you can use two ways. You can present a 3D model of the city with a photorealistic model, but that's more, you can't change that model. You have to work with a semantic or what we call parametric model so that you can change the city. And if you want to create new parts of the city, it's much more easier to use this kind of parametric technique. Start with, I took just the same areas as we're celebrating the 400 years anniversary. Some years ago, we worked in this in the early stages of the plan, just sketching the streets of the harbor. And by using this kind of parametric design, it's very easy from the street, creating parcels and creating buildings. Sorry, I didn't know what happened here. I'll get back to the presentation, sorry. It went to the last slide. I don't know why. One moment. One moment. I think I found some shortcuts that I didn't know about. Go to the last slide. Excuse me, once more. Okay, you can see my screen now. Perfect. By using this early sketch and digitizing the streets, you can create this kind of parcels and buildings forming the parcels and different kinds of buildings and different kinds of zoning. And then you can add textures to the map, 3D maps. Now this way of working is very good we have new areas and we want to test new kinds of density exploitation to different areas. If you run this little clip, you can see that we work with the buildings parametrically. So the buildings are created by numbers and letters, you can say. And you can drag the buildings, you can add floors to the buildings, and you can move streets in the area. And in real time, you can say, have the new street forming and a new building. And you get instance new information about the gross area of this building or this part of the town. This is a very simple example, but how we can work with parametric modeling and parametric design. Further, and as you can see, we can describe a building in many ways by using this kind of parameters and change the building, the facade, and the materials, and so on. One example that we have using this technique, we found historic material from a master plan from the last century, and we digitized the streets and then created this kind of parametric model. How could Gothenburg, city of Gothenburg, look like if we have used that master plan? And we used the software called City Engine to create this parametric city. And then you can in detail see how could this part of the town in this old master plan had looked like if we have built it. And you can go around in the model and see how it looks like from the street level. It's just, I think, an interesting example. But we use this kind of technique nowadays. This is a detailed plan called Backaplan, where we use this parametric modeling, creating the streets and creating the buildings of the plan. And when we have this kind of technique, you can use it to create a digital twin or digital copy of the whole town. And 3 years ago, we started a project called Virtual Gothenburg, which is actually building a digital twin of our physical environment of the city. And the goal of the project is to get more efficient, better planning of urban planning, and also better management, maintenance of the city, and also how we can experience the city in new ways. So that we can understand the challenges that we have, and so we can get some kind of consensus about the problems and take those necessary actions that we must take. And a digital twin, what is that? Of course, it's something like it's a visual, but we can also be a functional representation of something. And it's also important that you have the connected information, all the information that we have within the city connected to the twin. And often you talk about real-time data, as the traffic outside, flow of water, real-time information that you put in the digital twin. So you can steer and control different functions of the street. And you can also use AI to analyze the data that you have and visualize it in the twin. And of course, you can also use AI to collect the data, building the digital twin as well. We have seen some astonishing example here earlier from how you work with the GIS in Ukraine. And for me, a digital twin is actually GIS, but in more realistic form, you can say. Why a digital twin then? It's like building a car. It's a lot of parts in a car. You have the steering, you have the engine and so on. Now this must fit into a perfect model of the car, and then you can crash test the car, and in some years you can buy it on the market. But why do we not make the same thing with our cities? We must crash test our cities so that we can see if they work in the reality or in some virtual reality, that is. We also can talk about multidisciplinary urban planning when architects like us can work with environmental engineers, with traffic planners, so that we can work in the same model together as like we're building a car. It's also very important to work with the citizen engagement when you build a city, of course. This is an example called Min Stad or My City, where you as a citizen can have suggestions about urban planning, different proposals, different ideas. Then we can use this kind of ideas in our urban planning. You can go into the minstad.gotoborg.se if you want to look into it. It's a 3D model of the city. You can go around and explore anything. We also saw a wonderful example from Ukraine with multi-criteria analysis. And this is also very important when you can use different kind of data and compare the data together. In this, for instance, ecological, sustainability, social, and economic, and put that in the same model to make this kind of equal and transparent validation. And that's very important in decision making. So the key benefits of using a digital twin, of course, the climate. We're going to be climate neutral in 2030. We say it's just 7 years. It's a little window of time. So we see that we must use new techniques to get there. Resilience, how we can build a robust city. For instance, regarding higher sea levels in the future. Planning, of course, as I mentioned, a more smart and multidisciplinary approach to planning. Maintenance of the city. Tourism, how we can present the city and visit the city if you are not able to travel here, or pre-site visits of the city. How can we plan different events in the future? Innovation together with the companies in the city. We must work together to get there to climate zero. Learning about the city in the schools. What is a city? What is urban planning? The history of the city and the future of the city. And of course, democracy. How can we be more transparent in what we do and involve the citizens in the urban planning process? And also branding of the city. How can we be the most innovative city in the world? The digital twin that we're building is approximately 800 square kilometers. So it's a big model. And we use the data that we already have within the city and use this kind of tools to transform it to a 3D model that we can use in different applications. So here's an example of the model. To the left, we have the model, and to the right, we have an aerial photo of the city. So it's much the same information that we can see. And a perspective view of the city in the digital twin. This looks like reality, but if you go very near, you see that this is a copy or a model of the city. And as I said, the information is from all the departments that we have that have geographic data within the city. So it's actually not new information. We can see the target level of detail. How realistic do we think we can build a digital twin? This is a city in Gothenburg called Linnégatan. And in the digital twin, we see the objects forming the 3D model. And in what we call a gaming engine, it looks like this. So we think we can have this kind of level of detail in the whole city in some years. This is just an isolated area in the city where we have this kind of resolution. And what you see is just a little part of what you have regarding a digital twin. Most of the data are, you can say, assets.
Hey, Martin. Good.
And this kind of data, as we talk about GIS, we have data describing the objects in the model. And for having a structure, we must use some kind of information models to structure this data. And we call it a city information model.
Yeah.
It's common ownership, definition, and information model describing environment.
Nee, ik ben in Oekraïne dan. Dus dat gaat hem niet worden. Nee.
The digital twin information model can be divided into different We have the digital terrain, yes, is someone agreeing? Yeah. And we have the land use and transportation and so on. Here we use information model as it's a standard, international standard called CityGML. And by using this kind of technique, you can have the virtual Gothenburg as a center and the information model. And if you see the red arrow is actually the life cycle of the built environment. In every stage, you can have information in the digital twin and use it in your planning. And finally, some examples of how we have worked with the digital twin. This is an example of climate change adaptation. Actually a scenario where we have used IPCC scenarios with 1 meter higher sea level, and also a storm occasion with additional 1.5 meter, and we get 2.5 meter higher sea levels. How does that look in the central part of the city? Another example with some sound on it, I think. This is the same thing I showed you earlier, but in this case we have skyfall, or you can say heavy rain, very much water in a small amount of time and in a secluded area. And we can have this kind of water flowing with a lot of energy, so much energy that we can move objects like cars. And we have seen this kind of flooding in Europe lately, in Belgium, Sweden, and other countries, northern Italy right now. A lot of problems due to the climate change. So we must find new ways to handle it. Do you get the idea? And the digital twin is, of course, a very useful tool when you want to describe what can happen in this kind of skyfall. Get to the next example. Here's traffic, and we have used a traffic analyze model tool called Vissim, and the data we have visualized in the engine, the gaming engine called Unreal Engine, same engine that Fortnite is built with, and you can visualize the information and see it more in like a realistic model. So every line of numbers is actually a car or pedestrian, bicycle in this model. And you can go around on the model and see how does this kind of scenario look like. Also, example how we can use a digital twin. Another example with sound on it. I hope it's not too high. We will work with Volvo cars, and investigating autonomous vehicles and the meeting with pedestrians. With the sound here, so go to the next slide. And this is urban planning project, Korsvägen. We also use a digital twin in this kind of planning. It's also station. We talked about the West Link, the train tunnel earlier. And a very central part of the city, a central area, Centralområdet in Gothenburg. And we also use the digital twin to visualize this new area. And we can also visualize this in real time with the politician, with board meetings and so on, to get more efficient and quicker actions and decisions. And actually, we also have made this historical digital twin from the 7th century. But I think this also digital twin, and you can go back in time and back to real time investigating the city. So the digital twin can act as a virtual lab where new solution for an inclusive and climate neutral city can be tested, displayed, and put into action, so that we can understand what we are facing, so we can have some kind of consensus and that we can take the right actions that we have to take. And finally, you recognize this was the first image. This is from Frihamnen, or the 400 years anniversary party. Tomorrow it starts. And here we have used the digital twin to plan the event area. So that's also one thing you can do in a digital twin. You can see how the area looks like, the great tent. I think you can be like up to 20,000 persons in this tent. And you can see how you can work with stages, with lighting and safety. How can you move in the area? If something happens, what do you do then? This is a very good tool to work with, and you can collaborate in the tool called Omniverse. It's from NVIDIA, this tool. And finally, we often talk nowadays about metaverse. And what is a metaverse? It could be some kind of, or several 3D worlds, virtual worlds that you can go between, like internet, but not websites. It's virtual worlds. And like we call it Göteborg. And this is this film or image. We are testing how you can explore and have virtual concerts in the digital twin. And we can also use it for citizen engagement and other services. We've also seen that several cities in the world now are creating this kind of metaverse. So this is probably the future of municipal services, metaverse. So finally, I will little film showing this Göteborg. And as a background, we have the digital twin. Why not ending with a virtual romance? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eric. We actually have a little bit of time. Maybe we have questions in the audience, if you don't mind, since we have such an opportunity. Or comments. The level of details is absolutely impressive.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
A question. Once more. The next step is, of course, creating applications. Applications, for instance, for urban planning, for the detailed planning process, but also building permits. We have also this kind of examples from the tourism industry, how we can use a digital twin to plan future events, how we can work with arenas in the city. But perhaps the most interesting is how we can work with climate change adaptation. We have a lot of work in city of Gothenburg adapting to higher sea levels and skyfalls. So that will also be the future. And perhaps find some more details, level of detail to the digital twin, like buildings and so on. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.